The Runaways by Victor Canning. Chapter 1. Lightning Strikes Twice. It had been raining all night and all the morning. Raining hard all over Dorset, Wiltshire and Hampshire. It was a cold February rain, filling the ditches, swelling the rivers, and stripping the few dead leaves that still clung to the trees. It made quagmires of the cow treads at field gates, spouted over blocked gutters, and flooded the low-lying roads so that passing cars sent up bow waves of spray and soaked unlucky passers-by. Now at 11:30 precisely, a Smiler was being driven in a police car under the escort of two burly patrolmen. The father and mother of a thunder and lightning storm was brewing overhead. At first, it was a few little murmurs, slowly rising to a full-scale roll and rumble and heavy thunder. Suddenly, there came a great stabbing downward sword thrust of lightning that turned the whole world into a blue and yellow dazzle of light. Smiler jumped in his seat and cried, "Blimey!" The policeman alongside him smiled. He said, "Nothing to be scared of, son. Just think, if we hadn't picked you up, you'd be out in it, soaked even more." He glanced at Smiler's pile of wet clothes on the floor of the car, and then at the blanket-wrapped figure. It was a red, yellow and green striped blanket, and all that could be seen of Smiler was his head sticking out of the top, his fair hair still wet. Smiler, real name Samuel Miles, was 15 years and 5 months old. He had escaped 2 weeks before from an approved school and had been picked up that morning by the police. He had been caught because of a tip from a farmer in whose barn he had been hiding and whose eggs he had been eating, sucking them raw. Smiler wasn't scared. The lightning had just made him jump, that was all. It took quite a lot to make Smiler scared. Smiler could look after himself. He was tallish and well-built, with a friendly, squarish face, a pressed-in smudge of a nose, and a pair of angelic blue eyes that, when he put on his special smile, made him look as though butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. But if Smiler didn't scare easily, there were also a lot of things that Smiler didn't like. Smiler didn't like school, for instance. Particularly, he didn't like approved school, and he had run away from it after exactly 13 days and 4 hours residence. Smiler didn't much care for the country either, not because it scared him or he felt out of place there. Smiler could always make himself at home in new surroundings. He just preferred towns and cities, where there were more opportunities for picking up the odds and ends of things that made living tolerable. After all, when you were mostly on your own, you had to eat and drink, have a bit of money in your pocket, and be able to go to the cinema now and then, and treat yourself to a Coke in a cafe when you felt like company. Most of all, he didn't like the long periods when his father went off to sea. Then, instead of living in lodgings with his father and having wonderful time, he was always dumped with Sister Ethel and her husband, Albert. Smiler didn't like living with his married sisters and husband. Not because he didn't like them. They were all right, except when they were fussy about their house and their furniture and grumbling because his hands always marked the paintwork. Also, Smiler didn't like being idle. He liked to be busy. The trouble was that people made such a fuss about some of the things he did. Well, like pinching a bottle of milk from a doorstep if he was thirsty, or nicking a comic book from a shop if he felt like reading. The driver, eyeing Smiler's reflection in the interior mirror, grinned and said, "You look like a red Indian in that blanket. Little Chief Sitting Bull." At that moment, 200 yards ahead of the car, a streak of lightning flared earthwards. It seared itself into the top of branches of a tree at the roadside, wreathed its way down the trunk and hit the ground with a crack that made the whole earth shake. A great branch was split from the top of the tree and crashed across the road, blocking it. The police car braked and skidded to a halt 20 yards from the obstruction. A small car coming in the opposite direction was not so lucky. The branch fell a few yards in front of the car and the driver braked hard and the car slewed sideways into the block. The two policemen, alert as all good policemen should be in an emergency, jumped out of the patrol car and dashed through the rain to give assistance to the driver of the car, who, as a matter of fact, was more shaken and shocked than injured. It took the two policemen a good 3 or 4 minutes to climb over the obstruction and to assure themselves that the driver was in no great distress. It took the driver of the patrol car another few minutes to get back to the car so that he could send out a call to headquarters reporting the road blockage and summoning assistance. As he sent out the radio call, he knew that the moment he had finished, he would have to add another, reporting the escape again from custody of one Samuel Miles. In the car mirror, as he sent his report to the policeman, the policeman could see the back seat. The only evidence that Smiler had ever sat there was a damp patch on the leather. Smiler had gone. His pile of clothes had gone, and so had the blanket. Smiler, at that moment, was 300 yards away, running barefoot along the side of a ploughed field, pelting up the slight slope to a crest of a woodland which he could just glimpse through the driving sheets of rain. He ran, holding his hands around the tucked-up edges of the blanket. His naked legs and thighs, mud and rain splattered. All his clothes and his shoes were gathered in front of him in the blanket. As Smiler kept running, he was smiling to himself because he was free. This time, because there were some lessons he only had to be given once to remember. He meant to stay free. Just what he would do with his freedom he didn't know, except that he was going to enjoy it until his father got back from sea. When his father returned, he knew he would quickly clear up the whole mess and misunderstanding that had sent him off to reform school, and heaven alone knew where his father was at this moment. Somewhere on the high seas, cooking away for the crew, or maybe giving them a tune from his mouth organ or on a mouth organ on the afterdeck. A Smiler disappeared into the rain-shrouded countryside. The second policeman returned to the car, took one look at the back seat and said, "He's opped it." "Gone?" said the other. "With our blanket." "Do we go after him?" "In this weather?" "And with this mess on the road? Not likely. Anyway, he won't get far when the call goes out for him." The policeman grinned and said, jokingly, "Wanted, Little Chief Sitting Bull. Height 5 feet 6 inches, fair hair, blue-eyed, age 15 plus, wearing a red, green and yellow blanket